story of Job is one of the most profound accounts of suffering and faith in the Bible. It tells of a righteous man whose life was turned upside down, not because of wrongdoing, but because of his faithfulness. Job lived in the land of Uz and was known for his integrity, devotion to God, and care for his family. He was greatly blessed with wealth and children, yet remained humble and obedient. What follows is a detailed account of his loss, his suffering, and his perseverance. This is the story of Job. Job lived in the land of Uz, and he was known throughout the region as a man of great integrity. He was blameless and upright, meaning he lived honestly and treated others with fairness and compassion. Job feared God deeply and avoided evil in both word and action. He was blessed with 7 sons and 3 daughters, and his family was the joy of his life. Job was also extremely wealthy, owning thousands of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys, along with many servants. Despite his wealth, Job remained humble and devoted to God. Job cared deeply about the spiritual lives of his children. Whenever his sons and daughters gathered for feasts, Job would rise early the next morning to offer sacrifices on their behalf. He did this because he feared that they might have sinned or dishonored God in their hearts. Job's prayers were not occasional, but continual, showing his commitment as both a father and a servant of God. He believed that obedience mattered even when no one was watching. His home was filled with responsibility, reverence, and love. This routine reflected Job's sincere devotion to righteousness. One day, a gathering took place in the heavenly realm where the sons of God presented themselves before the Lord. Among them was Satan, whose role was to accuse and challenge humanity. God spoke of Job with honor, saying, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" Satan responded with accusation, claiming that Job only feared God because of the protection and blessing surrounding him. He argued that if God removed his hand, Job would surely curse him to his face. The Lord then set clear boundaries, saying that Job could be tested, but his life must be spared. Suddenly, Job's life was shattered by a series of disasters that came one after another without pause. One messenger arrived, breathless and trembling, and said, "Your oxen were plowing and your donkeys were grazing when raiders attacked, carried them off, and killed the servants with the animals." Before Job could even process the news, another servant rushed in with smoke on his clothes and announced, "Fire fell from the sky and burned the sheep and shepherds, leaving nothing behind." Not long after, a third messenger came running, covered in dust, and reported, "Chaldean raiders stole the camels and killed the servants guarding them." Each time a messenger spoke, Job's heart sank deeper, and the room seemed to grow colder with each new loss. With every report, Job watched his wealth and security vanish piece by piece, as if the ground beneath him was being pulled away. Then came the most devastating message of all, a blow that pierced Job's heart beyond measure. The day had already been filled with loss, but this news was unlike anything he could bear. A messenger arrived running toward Job, his face pale and his body trembling, as if the very act of speaking might collapse him. His clothes were torn, his breath came in heavy gasps, and his eyes were wide with terror. Job could immediately tell that the message was not simply tragic, it was unbearable. He braced himself, knowing that this time the news would change everything. The messenger could hardly speak, but he managed to describe what had happened in the house where Job's sons and daughters were feasting. They had been gathered together enjoying a meal and celebrating in each other's company when a violent windstorm suddenly swept across the land. The storm did not arrive slowly, but with sudden force, like a terrifying power unleashed from the desert. The wind struck the house with such intensity that it tore through the roof and walls, breaking the structure apart in moments. The sound of cracking timber and crashing stones filled the air, leaving no time for anyone inside to escape. The messenger's voice shook as he described the collapse, as if the memory still haunted him. Job stood frozen as the messenger continued, unable to move or speak. The man's words were rushed and broken, because the scene he witnessed was too shocking to describe calmly. He said the house fell on the young people, and there was no way to rescue them once the building came down. The weight of the debris crushed everything inside, burying Job's children beneath rubble and dust. When the dust finally settled, there was silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that follows sudden death. The messenger could only repeat the same sentence over and over, unable to find new words for the tragedy. As the final truth settled into Job's mind, he stood in stunned silence, feeling as though the world had stopped turning. He could not breathe, could not speak, could not even cry at first, because the shock was too deep. The reality was impossible to accept. His children were gone, and his world had been destroyed in a single moment. In that silence, Job's grief began to form, not as anger, but as a heavy emptiness that filled his soul. He had lost his family, his future, and the joy that once made life worth living. Everything he had ever held dear had been stripped away, and Job was left alone to face a life he never imagined. In the midst of unbearable grief, Job did something that would shock anyone who has ever suffered. He tore his robe and shaved his head, not as a dramatic act, but as a sign of deep mourning in his culture. These outward actions were not simply emotional reactions. They were the visible marks of a man whose heart had been shattered into pieces. Imagine losing everything you love in one day, and then watching your own world collapse, and still not turning away from God. Yet Job did not respond with rage, bitterness, or rebellion. Instead, he bowed down to the ground, and in the middle of his pain, he worshipped, refusing to demand answers or accuse God of wrongdoing. He acknowledged the truth of his life, saying, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return," as if to declare that he never truly owned anything, but only borrowed it from God. Then he praised God even while his heart was breaking, declaring, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away, and blessed be the name of the Lord." These were not empty words. They were the words of a man who chose faith over bitterness, trust over confusion, and surrender over anger. Heaven watched as Job remained faithful amid devastation, becoming a living example of faith that stands firm even when everything is lost. Satan was not satisfied and returned once more to challenge Job's faith. He argued that physical pain would break Job where loss had failed, claiming that a man's body could not withstand such torment. God again permitted the test, but he strictly forbade Satan from taking Job's life, setting a boundary that protected the soul even while the body suffered. Soon after, the pain began, starting as a small discomfort and quickly spreading into something far worse. Job was struck with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head, covering his entire body. The wounds were inflamed and oozing, making every movement a fresh agony. As the sores grew, Job's skin became a constant source of pain, and the wounds seemed to multiply without relief. His body became covered in sores that burned, itched, and festered, causing him to wince with every breath. The pain was relentless, and relief never came, not day or night. His suffering was not just physical, it invaded his thoughts, his emotions, and his ability to find rest. Job had endured the loss of his children and possessions, but this pain struck deeper, attacking the body itself. It was as if his suffering had moved from the outside world into his very flesh. Job sat among ashes, scraping his sores with broken pottery to ease the pain, a desperate act that showed how much he had fallen from comfort and dignity. Ashes were used as a symbol of mourning and humility, and Job's choice to sit in them revealed the depth of his despair. His appearance became so altered that he was barely recognizable to those who had once respected him. His skin was marred, his body weakened, and his face showed the marks of constant suffering. Sleep escaped him as the pain burned day and night, leaving him exhausted and restless. Every night was a battle against the burning torment, and every morning brought the same agony. Job's breath became offensive even to those closest to him, and his body began to waste away from the constant pain and lack of rest. His strength faded, and he could no longer perform the duties he once had, even as he sat alone in his suffering. His mind was filled with sorrow, and his emotions swung between grief, confusion, and moments of quiet endurance. The suffering was complete, affecting his physical, emotional, and mental state, leaving him in a place of deep vulnerability. Yet even in this state, Job continued to cling to his faith, refusing to curse God. His pain was no longer only loss, but a complete assault on his body and spirit. Job's wife, crushed by grief and exhaustion, spoke words born from despair. She urged Job to curse God and die, saying,
Do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die.
Job rebuked her gently, reminding her that they had accepted good from God and must also accept hardship. He refused to abandon his faith even when death seemed preferable to pain. Though overwhelmed, Job did not sin with his lips. His response showed that faith can remain even when hope feels distant. 3 friends came to visit Job when they heard of his suffering. When they first saw him, they wept aloud and tore their robes in sorrow. They sat with him in silence for 7 days and nights, overwhelmed by the severity of his pain. But when they began to speak, Eliphaz said, If someone ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? But who can withhold speaking? Bildad declared, How long will you say these things? Will the words of your mouth have a strong wind? Zophar added, If you would earnestly seek God and plead with the Almighty, surely he would restore you. Their theology left no room for innocent suffering. Job defended himself against their accusations with honesty and anguish. He insisted that he had not committed hidden sins deserving such punishment. He cried out to God, questioning why the righteous suffer while the wicked seem to prosper. Job longed for answers and justice, not escape from pain. His words revealed deep confusion, grief, and longing for understanding. He did not deny God's existence but struggled with God's silence. His faith wrestled openly with sorrow. At last, God spoke from a whirlwind, commanding Job's attention. Instead of explaining the reason for suffering, God revealed his power and wisdom. He questioned Job about the foundations of the earth, the boundaries of the sea, and the paths of the stars. God showed that human understanding is limited compared to divine knowledge. Job realized that he had spoken beyond his understanding. He humbled himself before God, acknowledging his smallness. His faith shifted from seeking answers to trusting God's sovereignty. God then addressed Job's friends, rebuking them for misrepresenting him. He declared that Job had spoken honestly, while they had spoken wrongly. God instructed them to offer sacrifices and asked Job to pray for them. Job obeyed, interceding for those who had wounded him with their words. God accepted Job's prayer and restored their relationship. This act showed Job's forgiveness and spiritual maturity. His suffering had not hardened his heart. Finally, God restored Job's fortunes by giving him twice as much as he had before, returning to him new herds of livestock and multiplying his wealth beyond measure. He was blessed with 7 sons and 3 daughters, and their beauty was so remarkable that the land celebrated them and their names became well known among the people. Job's restored wealth also came with new servants, renewed flocks, and expanded land, rebuilding his life from the ground up. His community no longer saw him as cursed or broken, but as blessed and honored once again, and he regained peace and respect among his people. Job lived for another 140 years, long enough to see his children's children grow and to witness 4 generations of his family. Though his losses were real and never forgotten, his restoration was profound, and his story ended not in pain, but in hope. The story of Job teaches that suffering is not always a sign of guilt or a punishment for wrongdoing, and it challenges the common belief that pain always equals sin. It reveals that faith can endure confusion, silence, and unbearable pain without collapsing, because true devotion is not based on circumstances. Job's life shows that God remains sovereign even when his purposes are hidden, and that his wisdom is far beyond human understanding. This story speaks to anyone who has questioned God in moments of loss, reminding us that doubt does not equal betrayal, but can be a part of honest faith. And as Job 42:12-17 describes, the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning, and he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he called the name of the first Jemimah, the name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Karen-Happuch. In all the land there were no women found so beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father gave them inheritance among their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years and saw his sons and his sons' sons 4 generations. So Job died, old and full of days. Amen.